Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. This is Atalay Atasu speaking, Professor of Technology and Operations Management at INSEAD, and the Bianca and James Pitt Chair in Environmental Sustainability, also at INSEAD. Today we will be talking about fashion and circularity, two strongly interlinked terms that are on many radars. The webinar today is part of the Tech Talk X series by Digital at INSEAD. Tech Talk X series are dedicated to exploring new digital technologies and their applications, as well as the impact these have on management, business, and society. In these talks, we span a wide spectrum of topics on both emerging and existing technologies and provide technology-specific insights, as well as management, business, and societal perspectives. If you want to find out more, please go to Digital at INSEAD for more information. So I want to start the discussion with a quick keynote. That the fashion and apparel industry is under a lot of pressure from environmental and planetary boundaries point of view is no secret. As you will see in the next visualization, this is primarily driven by the increasing consumption patterns that outweigh economic development and combined with reduced utilization rates as depicted by this wonderful Ellen MacArthur graph on your screens. Overall, it is clear that there is a lot of pressure on the fashion and apparel industry and a lot of talk about bringing circularity in fashion to address this problem. To this end, our goal in the conversation today is to explore the business case and enablers for circularity on the fashion ground. As with most circularity-related discussions, I believe a really good starting point is to take a peek at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation Butterfly Framework on Circularity, which you will see in the next visualization. In particular, the next visualization will show you that the industrial production system portions of the butterfly diagram, can we move on to the next slide, please? Which is on the right-hand side of this figure, on the blue portion. This visualization is pretty useful for bringing everybody to the same page before we take a deep dive into looking for solutions around circularity in fashion. Now, this is a good framework in the sense that it not only sheds light into opportunities towards circularity in the fashion industry, but also allows us to identify where the challenges are or could be. So to this end, maybe we can start with the opportunities framing first. This circularity framework in the Ellen MacArthur Foundation butterfly diagram, especially looking at the industrial side, the blue portion, basically says that there are many paths to circularity, starting from a sharing economy, to maintenance, to reuse, to refurbishing, and including recycling, of course. But in contrast to the broader misconception, it also suggests that circularity is almost never just about recycling. In fact, for many, recycling is the least preferred form of circularity. Circularity efforts should rather focus on increasing resource efficiency in the form of increasing material and energy utilization by changing business models towards servicization, they say. This includes a sharing economy perspective. It could include leasing or rentals, or even pay-per-use type of business models in the same context. The framework also suggests that changing business models toward product life extension, reuse, and repair can not only be good for the environment, but also more profitable for the industrial organization itself. Now, these are fantastic ideas to move the industry in a more resource efficient and less polluting direction, that's for sure. Yet, it is also important to note that this is actually not a trivial task. If you look at the developments on the field around circularity adoption in fashion, we see many indications of the same. There are many non-traditional obstacles in a circular system that our linear economy reflexes, or that our managerial reflexes shaped in a linear economy do not easily capture. So to this end, I want to talk about the first challenge around circularity, which I will call access. So access is about getting a hold of used products, which is often very difficult in fashion, apparel, or in any other industry. And there are many reasons why this is difficult. Now, if you can think about it from a fashion producer's perspective, how can a circularity committed fashion company make sure that the products that they have produced and sold before make it back to their premises for circularity purposes? Take a blue jean producer, for instance, or take a denim producer, right? In order for a denim producer to be circular, they need to make sure that the jeans or the fabric that they have sold for the production of those jeans find their way back to their premises. Is it easy? How easy it is to convince your customers to bring the used jeans back to your premises for recycling purposes, right? That's just one example around what I mean by access. The second issue that we need to pay attention to is what I call process. Now, imagine that you managed to solve the access problem in that, somehow the jeans that you have sold in the past made it back to your location, back to your premises. Now, is it economically viable or is it technically feasible to process those used products for whatever circularity model to bring them back to the market? Right? Can you recover the cotton in those jeans in the original form that you fed into yarn production and then that you fed into the fabric manufacturing operation? This is often very difficult because processing those used products in order to reclaim the fibers itself, especially if you do it in a mechanical fashion, for instance, will break the fibers, shorten the fiber length, and won't allow you to produce a high quality yarn that will feed into, again, denim production. So it is difficult. You can think of a chemical process to do the same, in which you will try to recover the cellulose in the cotton fiber, but then will you be able to shape those fibers again to provide the same material characteristics, the touch of the original cotton itself? It is very difficult. So beyond recycling, though, it is often very hard to process recovered or used products in an economically viable and environmentally preferable fashion. Now imagine that you solve the access problem, you also solve the process problem. You still need to think about the value, right? Will there be a market for the product that you try to bring back in through circularity? Where is the value added from circularity coming from? We often assume, for instance, that recycling is cheaper and that by recovering materials, it will be cheaper to produce the next generation product itself. This is often not really the case. The cost to take back or access and recover materials and bring them back to production or to the market for reuse purposes can often be much more expensive than producing from virgin materials. Then the question is whether there is a premium for recycled content or used products in that marketplace. How about other circularity options? Durability, servicization. Are there really better markets or premiums on the consumer or customer side for those options, right? So before we think about circularity in any industry, we need to find good answers to these questions. Now, of course, our goal in this conversation is not to focus on the obstacles or the challenges, but on the solutions. For that, we have a fantastic panel with thought leaders looking into finding technological and business model-driven solutions to enable circularity in fashion. And our next step in this panel, in this discussion, is to pick their brains on the solutions agenda. With that, I would like to start our panel discussion by asking a number of related questions to our panelists. We have Christiane Dolva Törnberg from H&M Foundation. She's leading their strategy and planet initiative. We have Annie Gullingsrud, who is the Chief Strategy Officer at E.ON. And we also have Josefine Olsson from Accenture in the European Lead Future Tech Initiative within Accenture. Thank you all very much for coming. If you allow me, I would like to start asking a good question to Christiane representing H&M Foundation here, not H&M, H&M Foundation, right? Christiane, based on your experience, do you think recycling will get the textile, fashion, or apparel industry into a circular model? What is your view about the path to circularity in this industry?
Thank you so much for such a good introduction. It was very insightful, and I think it pointed to a lot of the different challenges that a lot of brands in the industry are currently working on in a very good way. So thanks for that. I think with regards to your question on recycling, and I think that's an area of circularity that we tend to go to pretty soon in a discussion about creating circular models. It is often a discussion about, as you say, how do we get products back so that we can process them towards recycling. And as you pointed out, there are a number of different challenges to do that, which is why I think that it's so important that we remember that if you look at the Ellen MacArthur butterfly diagram, recycling is literally the last resort. So I do think that for this industry to have a decent chance at getting more circular, the focus and the ambitions should really lie on keeping the loops as close to the product as possible, which means, for example, looking at product development and design. So much is determined in a design stage of a product that will enable it to circle in different loops when it comes to circularity. So to me, I think that a lot of the opportunities within this industry is to focus on what choices you make at the design stage. You mentioned durability. I believe that that's crucial, because if you want to have a product that can last for a long time, it needs to withstand the test of time. I would also say that there are a couple of other key features that needs to be in place for that to happen, because it doesn't really matter if you create, say, a jacket that can physically last for 20, 30 years. If it is created in a style and a fashion, that means that the user will grow tired of it and want a new one next season. So I think timeless design is a very important feature that's sometimes overlooked, and where I believe that there is a huge possibility for the industry to tap into a big secondhand market or a reuse market if products are created to start with the ambition to last, not only physically, but also in terms of how they look, and to create that sort of emotional connection in the design, which means that you want to create the favorite t-shirt that you don't want to get rid of, or that if you do, you actually choose to pass it on to the next user because it's created in a way where the value of the product is maintained. So that touches on your value statement there when it comes to reuse and secondhand and allowing products to be able to have a second, a third, or a fourth user. It needs to be produced with that in mind from the start, because if it is, then that product will have a value as a secondhand item. If it isn't, it will not have a value, and it will be really hard to calculate home any type of profit on selling it again. So I would really highlight the things that needs to be done on a design and product development perspective. And it also taps into, repairability, ensuring that products actually can be repaired. And I think in the industry today, that's often regarded as a costly endeavor to set up some type of repairability service. I do think that you could flip it around and look at it as a service that can provide value and possibly be a revenue stream. In terms of, you don't blink twice when you leave your car to service each year. So why wouldn't you maybe do the same with some of your garments and products? So I think that when it comes to the value statement and the access, there needs to be products that are attractive to get back. And it needs to be attractive not only from the brand's perspective, like how do we get it back, but looking at it from a user's perspective, what's in it for me as an owner of a product to actually funnel it back into the system. And I think that if you switch that around and look at the user case, there is both opportunity to create access and provide value for the products that could come back. And then recycling just become the last resort when everything is so worn out that it can't have a second life. And maybe you don't even have to strive to recycle it from garment to garment again to the exact same fiber properties, because that's hard. Think creatively there as well. Maybe this could be an input material for something else.
Thank you, Christiane. What we are getting out of this is basically we need to think about, or I need to think about circularity. We need to put, more elaborate design thinking into the product itself, along with, some new business model choices to couple it in such a way that we can overcome these obstacles, in harmony, in essence. Thank you. And this brings us to the next question that I'd like to pick the brains of Annie Gullingsrud for, who is, again, Chief Strategy Officer at E.ON. Annie, can you tell us, is there anything that can be done at the product inception stage that will set the foundation for product circularity, in your opinion?
Yeah. Well, first I want to say thank you so much for having us for the panel, and appreciate the questions. Enjoyed your article as well, which I feel really set up the panel. And welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining for this conversation today. First, I want to tell you who E.ON is. E.ON is a company that was founded around 2017. I'm one of its founding members. It's a digital identity company. So the purpose is to give all products a digital identity, which will serve the product through the life cycle of the product end to end. So from inception into all of those use stages into recycle. So E.ON has created a product cloud. We're essentially a software as a service company. I joined in 2018, and the reason why I joined is because I had a lot of experience working in those wings of the butterfly that you showed, right? So I had experience working in the material space with Cradle to Cradle. I had experience working in products. I had experience working at Goodwill, who is the largest charity in the United States. And I had experience working with chemical recyclers. And so what I started to understand was that there was no communication line from inception, from the supply chain, or even from the designer into those use stages. So at the point that a product left a store, it was hard to embed that value that Christiane was talking about. That the term embedded value is so important, because I know companies put a lot of effort into the design, the creation of their products, right? So they're putting a lot of effort into materials, even creating sustainable materials. I was putting a lot of effort into that, working with my companies. And what I was finding, I spent several years working on a product with Stella McCartney, several years, several hundreds of thousands of US dollars. And then that thing just disappeared. I had no idea where it is. And so there was no telephone, right? There's no telephone there to communicate. So E.ON was founded to create that communication line for the circular economy. So all those wings, all those stakeholders, we talk about systems change, we talk about collaboration, but in order to do that, we actually need to be communicating with each other, right? We need to say, hey, this is this. Now, what happens is from the beginning to the end is very difficult. A designer says, I want this to disassemble, or this should go in this recycling chain, but there was no way to communicate that. So to solve that problem, we need digital infrastructure. We need an easy way to communicate. And so E.ON's developed a way to embed a digital identity. In this case, it's so simple at this point. It could be a QR code on a product, an RFID, something called an NFC, which is different from an NFT. It's an actual tappable tappable chip, to embed that into the product with a data set that can effectively communicate to the chain. And our product cloud enables the exchange and the communication between stakeholders. So part of what we do too is both the digital identity and the convening of the essential network partners into a marketplace. Was that clear? Okay.
Very clear, very clear. Thank you
you.
very much. I mean, we hear a lot of many conversations around, thinking about this as an ecosystem, thinking about or talking about the importance of communicating, very critical pieces of information across the value chain, right? Maybe you can also talk a bit about, where the business model choice, including, building infrastructures for information sharing and so on, can come together. To this end, I would like to go next on to Josefine Olsson from Accenture. Josefine, you work with a lot of large retailers around circular innovation and circular business models. And I actually have two specific questions for you on this front. Number one, how do new business models help address the access and value challenges specifically? And what do you think are the major barriers to scaling new circular business models? The second question is, do you mind actually sharing your own experiences in the fashion and apparel space as to how new technologies are coming in to address these access and process related challenges?
Great. I think it was two great questions, and I will try to keep them both in mind. And also thanks for a lot of good points that have been made here today already. But I think starting with the first one around the circular business models, I think increasing the volumes from these type of business models like resale, like repair, like remake, it's a huge opportunity for the planet, as we have discussed, but also for the business. And resale alone is expected to be a $500 billion market in 2030, growing from about 50 today. But to achieve that, we of course very much need to increase access of this type of business models. And I think there's multiple things that will be required to achieve that. First of all, I think we need to increase the volumes of pre-loved garments that is actually accessible for circular flows. And I think we need to become much better at guiding the customers on what to do with garments you no longer wear, instead of just keeping it in storage or throwing it away. And meaning we need to help them to understand what to resell, what to repair, how can I activate clothes that I already have in my closet, and potentially, as we have discussed, recycle as the last resort then. And I think we also need to focus on creating much better and smoother customer experiences so that these type of business models like resell is present and available in the channels and at the places where the customers are. We also need to work with building a much more attractive assortment, working with curation and again with upskilling the customers so we understand what type of assortment of garments we should put in what type of circular flows, and creating incentives for sellers to move garments back into these type of flows. And finally, I think the peer-to-peer perspective will be a huge accelerator, enabling customers to make transactions and transition of products between each other directly. And in the end, it will be all about the value, as you were talking about as well, Atalay, and how we can design the business models for resell and repair in ways that are financially viable. And I think to do that, we need to be very focused on securing the right price points through customer curation and style. We also need to drive volumes by customer demand and by designing leading customer experiences. And finally, we of course need to work on the cost side as well, building cost-efficient solutions and exploring things like automation and driving efficiencies in parts of the process that are not very efficient today. So lots of things to be done to achieve, but a huge potential both for business and planet and customer if we manage to achieve that. And then maybe touching a bit on your second question as well around the tech innovation, because as we have been talking about, the challenges and opportunities are of course very large, but I truly believe that tech can be an accelerator for many of these challenges. And to drive a profitable business case, we need to tap into tech opportunities and working with, again, powering a smooth customer experience and driving efficiency with automation and so on. I think we can see a lot of opportunities in using things like AI to, again, guide the customers on what to do with what type of garments and help create transparency of the garments that you actually already have in your closet with a digital wardrobe as an example. And again, like automation to address some of these very time-consuming tasks that are barriers in the processes today, like sorting or supporting staff with price setting and so on. So I think lots of opportunities for technology to address some of these challenges and unlock some of these great opportunities.
Thank you very much, Josefine. A real quick question. I'm also following the Q&A happening in this discussion. So there's one particular question that talks about the effect of the new Green Deal framework of the European Commission. Broadly speaking, I think we are going to see more and more regulations in this space, probably targeting different forms of circularity imposed on different organizations. And along with the built environment focus, fashion seems to be playing a major role in the European New Green Deal framework. So how do you see regulations, shaping up or hindering in a way certain forms of these initiatives? And feel free to unmute and jump on this. Annie, I see you unmuted. So.
Yeah, I can start. There's Eon's clients are global, so while we are based in the United States, our clients are global, and a lot of our clients are also global and in Europe. And one of the things that we're a part of a lot of the policy making and engaged in what's happening, and in particular, the digital product passports. So the DPP comes out of the EU Commission, and it's something that is being reviewed and developed right now. And what's exciting about the DPP is that what it does, it establishes a code, a data code for interoperability, communication across the value chain. And then it also establishes, we call this events, but essentially that the traceability of products as they're moving through the value chain or life cycle from end to end into recycle. And I have personally been involved with the conversations through the European Environmental Bureau and the EU Commission to bring forward the solution that we've created as a starting point. And so we are one company of other companies who have created a solution. We created a data protocol and then also have our product cloud, but there's others too. And for brands who are already working with us, it helps them to establish a starting point for the digital product passport. So we already know that the policy is going to be extremely helpful. What's also interesting is from analytics and insights perspective is the aggregate of all of that data, all of that passport data is also useful to brands. I mean, right now, everything that's happening post point of sale is just a black hole. And that's difficult for brands. They have no idea where things are going. And it would be nice to continue to have those customers, right? And so by having digital product passports, it's going to enable these brands to understand where their products are going and make better decisions. There's other things we're involved in too, but that's the key highlight for us.
Thank you, Annie. I saw you unmute for a second too, Josefine. Did you want to add something on the regulation discussion?
No, but I think you covered it quite well, Annie, but I think what you talked about here in the end very much resonates with me as well in terms of seeing how regulation is really pushing brands into taking the next step of ESG intelligence, and how many are now shifting from seeing the sustainability report as something you do once a year for reporting purposes, but rather now use it as a way of steering the business and understand what type of business models and what type of initiatives are really driving value, and value them from a broadly defined perspective, meaning both financial value, but also sustainability and customer value. And so I think we should very much see regulation as an accelerator, and that is what we're seeing a lot in many big retailers.
Thank you, Josefine. Christiane.
Yeah, I think I share the same notion that to a certain extent here, the regulation is needed, and it's hopefully going to drive progress. Also, if we look at some of the suggestions around producer responsibility as well, that will kind of force a different type of view on what your products that are put on the market. Where does the responsibility of the producer end? And I think that's helpful, and it's going to kind of make a level playing field. I also think it's important at the same time that when it comes to regulations, there are a lot of new business models and new ways of doing business that will need maybe some current regulation to be looked over as well, so we don't have pieces of legislation that hinders the flow of material across borders and stuff like that. So I think that there's a lot good going on, and I also hope that there will be, you know, unified regulation globally that will look at not hindering brands and producers that want to think outside the box.
Thank you very much, Christiane. I think this is a wonderful point. You know, I personally had a particular experience with especially electronics recycling regulations in the past, in the European context. And it's more often than not that people consider regulations as a, you know, mechanism for creating level playing grounds, but it ends up not necessarily being so. So there are lessons to be learned, especially from other industries, particularly from electronics, for the fashion industry and others, in that, you know, being proactive in shaping legislation is very critical in creating a level playing field for everybody. If you don't want to hinder, you know, critical and important initiatives in the future, I think, you know, industrial input into this form of regulation design is more critical than ever, in my view too. But I want to pull the panel back on our original plan a little bit now. We can go back to the Q&A towards the end one more time. You know, the insights we gathered so far are wonderful, but if you allow me, I'd like to continue the conversation with a deeper dive around the panelists' personal reflections around their own circularity experiences. So maybe we can start with Annie. Annie, you wrote a book about keeping products in circulation. You worked for Cradle to Cradle, which is the originator of the circularity framework, I would say. You even founded the industry's first chemical recycling working group, and you were at Cradle to Cradle. So you've seen a lot, especially over the last decade. So have you seen anything that truly works when it comes to circularity? And actually, what has not worked? Maybe that's a better question to ask.
Yeah, so it's been incredible to see the industry coming together to solve problems, and a lot of new innovators come to the table, from those like Resale, Infinited Fiber, Worn and so many others, right? It's been amazing to see that, and also an uptake of different materials in commercialized collections, right? And I've been watching this for 10 years. I think that part of the reason why IAN is here is to mobilize all of the different solutions, right? To enable from traceability to sustainable materials, to resale models, to rental models, to recycle models, is to actually pull that ecosystem together in a way to make it scale. So one thing, admittedly, that I haven't seen is scale. And it frustrates me, it saddens me a little bit. I would like to see scale. You know, there's a lot of conversations just like this that have been happening over the last 10 years and more. My mentors have been at this for decades longer than this, you know, and the environmental conversation, maybe not in fashion, but it started way back in the 40s, you know, and I think that we get stuck trying to find right and wrong. Like, I'll just call out the discussion around the Hague Index and the Sustainable Apparel Coalition, who I've known personally for the last decade. And we just get stuck in what's right, what's wrong, and what's perfect. And what the way that we get through this is we get through it by taking one step at a time. And we look to find solutions that can work together to scale. We should all have impact on our minds, right? Not small capsule collections. Like, how do we get this to hundreds of thousands of millions of products. And so I would say I haven't seen that yet. I would say that some brands are on their way there. I would like to see all brands toward, when we think, we should be thinking about, these brands are producing, some are producing billions of products a year. That's an incredible amount of impact if it can be the right kind of impact. So, I mean, that's what I would say I haven't seen yet and I would like to see. And I would say that hopefully we're on that journey to get there.
Thank you very much, Annie. So another personalized question for Christiane, if you don't mind, Christiane. So is creating circular flows for textiles the only silver bullet? Because, you know, if you look at the discussion or the debate, even in the regulatory frameworks, it is about, you know, managing flows largely. So how should we think of addressing circularity in the entire value chain, you know, beyond product flows? And how do we move about, you know, actually from thinking about circularity from a product perspective to more of a process or a system perspective?
Thank you. A very good reflection, and I think it's an important one. I think I once heard a definition of circularity that was like beyond looking at all the different charts, but it's about designing waste out of our systems. And that's kind of stuck with me. Also, when in my past, before I joined the H&M Foundation and started entering the nonprofit world of supporting, you know, sustainability initiatives, I was also sitting within the brand as a sustainability director, and I had that design waste out of our systems as a guiding star when it comes to sustainability. And to me, I believe that obviously, when it comes to sustainability, we are facing complex challenges, and complex challenges needs complex solutions. So no, I don't think, you know, a circular flow of products is the only silver bullet. And to a certain extent, we need to embrace that complexity. There is also biodiversity topics. There is water. There is CO2 emissions. It's a vast and very complex map of challenges. And in our strive to kind of simplify it and make it into attractive bite-sized solutions, I still think we need to embrace that complexity. And I think when it comes to circularity, particularly as well, we need to embrace the complexity that it's not only about, oh, hey, we're pushing all these products out on the market, so let's figure out how to get them back so we could, you know, sell them again or recycle them. Yes, that's one thing. But if you think of the term designing waste out of the system, there's a lot going on downstreams in the supply chain that is not circular, not even close to it as well. So looking at waste created during the production before a garment even becomes a garment, there is a lot of waste generated there that also needs to be looped back into whatever production flow it could be looped into. Looking at the material choices that are made and the chemicals that might be applied to it, and to ensure that you're not kind of doing something at the early stage that will hinder circularity later is important. I also think that, you know, looking at not only, you know, the textile cut-off wastes, but the emissions to water, to air, they also need to be circulated, because we have one planet and nothing gets added apart from sunlight, and nothing disappears even if you throw it in the trash. And we need to apply that thinking throughout the entire value chain, which, yes, is complex because the textile value chain is complex. We also need to address that. So as much as I love a conversation around, you know, new business models or rental or resell, which I think definitely needs to happen, especially if companies in this industry want to find revenue streams that allow them to decouple their growth from their impact, that's definitely needed, but it's not the single silver bullet. You need to also look at everything that goes on in the supply chain and the value chain, and make sure that that's also circular and takes other impact areas into consideration. And I just have to say, I really agree with Annie's point here on scale. I have also participated in a number of these conversations, and there are some good examples that tend to be lifted up. I've yet to see a good example of a company that has grown from being completely linear to have been able to actually switch. Because that's also a little bit what we need to think about here, that we need to pilot and test new business models, but when you pilot and test, think of it as one step on a journey to a lot of other steps that you want to scale, not a one-off pilot. And that would be my strong kind of urge to see. And that's also at the H&M Foundation. We work with supporting innovators and entrepreneurs through our Global Change Award. Ian was the previous winner of the Global Change Award a couple of years back. And I'm very happy to see now that there are a lot of new innovations and solutions that are targeting not only, you know, one piece of the circularity as in recycling, but targeting everything from, you know, digital traceability to end user applications to prolong garment lifespan as well. As well as the production and the supply chain. And I think that's important to not forget.
Thank you, Christiane. I think, you know, one nice framing around this that I heard very often, especially in academic circles, is, you know, circularity is not for the sake of circularity, it's for the sake of sustainability. And, you know, the definition of sustainability involves not only planetary continuity, but also business continuity. So we do need to think about those in a broader ecosystem thinking form, right? It's not just about the product, it's about processes, it's about interactions, it's about, you know, planetary and business boundaries. And to that end, actually, I want to move on to my next question to Josefine. Josefine, in your experience with the ecosystem broadly, can you, the business ecosystem broadly, can you tell us a bit more about why an ecosystem mindset is an important part of accelerating circular business models?
Yes, I think we have been touching upon it a bit already, but this again, it's a huge shift for many brands and retailers. They have been optimizing their current business models based on virgin assortments for many years now, and now we really need to accelerate a different type of agenda, and there's so much to learn and so little time to do it. And I fully believe that to be able to succeed with that, you need to have an ecosystem mindset, and you need to collaborate both within the company, meaning leveraging the full ecosystem of one company with all the different business units and functions, but of course also beyond the organizational boundaries. And many retailers, they have very high ambitious targets and strong leadership commitments from the top, but sometimes struggle a bit to translate that into tangible actions across the organization. And to build these new business models, you really have to bring everyone along. It impacts every part of the value chain, and you need to involve marketing, IT, assortment, store and online channels, logistics, finance. So that collaboration and ecosystem thinking within an organization, I think, is super important, and securing that shared vision and common KPIs to know what to strive for. But then, of course, I think it's super important also with the ecosystem mindset beyond the company sphere, meaning how can we collaborate with startups, with academia, with tech partners, even with other industry players. And startups sometimes act much quicker, and what we are seeing in terms of how they are driving the circular business model space, they play a very important role. And combining that speed and innovation with the customer base and volumes and capabilities that large fashion retailers have today, I think that will be essential to reach that scale and impact that we have been talking about, and really applying that system mindset and finding ways to act with speed and get access to different type of capabilities and insights and learnings that is very hard to do fully within one organization. And I think finally building, I guess, a bit on Christiane's point, I think we are seeing a lot of these startup collaborations in different smaller pilots, but I fully agree that we really need to set them up for success and see them as the first step of a committed partnership to scale, rather than just a test to test and learn. But yeah, scale is for sure the tricky thing here, right?
Thank you, Josefine. Before we move on to the next question, I actually would like to remind the audience to upvote the questions that they would like to be answered, because we are getting very close to the Q&A part of the discussion. So this is a broad question to all our panelists. Maybe we can start with Christiane. What is the most exciting thing that is happening in the circular fashion space from your point of view, Christiane?
That's a very good question. I like talking about the opportunities and what we actually see is happening out there. And I think two things. I briefly touched on the Global Change Award. I think that the exciting thing I see there is that there is innovation that has it's kind of moved from a lot of, when you say circularity, we got a lot of applications from recycling solutions to really solutions that cover the entire value chain. So I find that very exciting, because if there is an idea and someone's brave enough to start up a business around it, hopefully that means that there's opportunity there. The other part that I find very exciting is maybe touching a little bit on Josefine's point, is that I actually see efforts in terms of untraditional collaboration, unexpected partnerships, that I, throughout my conversations with different brands in the industry, I see really good and promising conversations where not only the industry is talking to their own industry, trying to solve it within the industry, but actually connecting the conversation to partners outside of the industry, because we need to create this kind of map. So that could be anything from a brand actually initiating conversations with a traditional waste management company in order to figure out what opportunities are there, as well as some of the partnerships in Resale and the technology there. So I guess that would be two kind of exciting, promising things I see added to that, the growth of secondhand.
Thank you. Josefine, what do you think?
Well, I agree with a lot of Christiane's point, but on that final note, I think the customer demand that we are now starting to see for some of these business models with a new generation that are thinking very differently in terms of shopping behaviors and how they look at fashion. And I think this is driving many brands to start acting with much larger speed and realizing that this is not only good for the planet, this is actually a really good business opportunity. And as well, a very clear enabler for many of them to reach their circularity and sustainability targets. And I think it's also very exciting to see all these tech innovation breakthroughs that we are seeing, both supporting circularity, but also the more broader transformation, as Christiane was talking about. And maybe final thing that excites me quite a lot is the shift we are starting to see when looking at the definition of value. Like, of course, financial value is still very crucial, but broadening that perspective and looking at combined business value with customer value and sustainability, and making decisions based on that combined value definition, that is something that excites me a lot, because I believe it will accelerate the movements we are seeing in this space quite a lot.
Thank you, Josefine. How about you, Annie?
Yeah, I'm really just piggybacking off of the other panelists. I want to share two things here. One's technical and one's maybe cultural, which is that what's exciting is and of course I'm going to speak about digital ID and technology, the engagement of all parts of the value chain and the ability to enable that communication. And Josefine called it out, the customer is a part of the value chain. I mean, they're a part of the value chain, and we haven't exactly put a lot of effort into engaging them. We have a little bit, but how do we bring the sustainability and the business incentive together in one part? And we think we can do that in the digital ID. We call that building transformational relationships with customers. We actually care about them, The other thing I'm seeing is the shift in how we design teams who are solving these problems. I'm really, really proud of what we've done over the last year at E.ON. One of the things that we realized is we've got really challenging problems on our hands. The planet is totally out of balance, and the planet is telling us very clearly that what we're doing isn't working. We have a lot of evidence to that, and it's harming people's lives. It may not be, well, it's here. I'm in California, so there's a drought impact to me, but in other parts of the world, there's a very severe impact to people's lives. Something we're doing isn't working. And one of the things that we've resolved at E.ON is maybe it's the people who have been solving these problems. Maybe we haven't had enough people at the table. And so we're considering how we build our teams and looking to how we build teams in a diverse way, bringing different backgrounds, race, culture, ages, experience, ways of thinking, right, to the table. Because we're not going to be, clearly we haven't solved this problem in the old way. Like the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over with literally expecting the different results, but getting the same results. And so we said, we do think it matters who's at the table. And so we're building a diverse team of people. Our team looks different, sounds different, behaves different. And we think that's a way to start solving problems differently. And so that's a huge deal. And I'm seeing that and over the last few years and how the fashion industry is responding to new knowledge and evidence and clarity of how we need to change,
Wonderful, wonderful. I think this is, we started with obstacles, but we are ending on a very high note in terms of what we are giving the audience. So a quick takeaways on my end, I'd like to share with the audience. Number one, what I will remember from this panel is that, we need to think about breaking that misconception that circularity is about recycling to start with. It's more about tech innovation. It's more about new business models. It's more about, systems thinking in the end, right? We actually know that we can't do it alone. We need customer involvement. We need to interact with others in the industry. We potentially need to interact with other industries as well, right? So in the end, it seems like, my takeaway is the collective action is that it's happening, but it's also necessary. So many of my personal interactions or observations in the circularity space involve limited financing towards tech innovations, investments, infrastructure, and so on, or sometimes about public buy-in to this. So from that point of view, I think, the bigger need that we have in moving circularity in the right direction is industrial partnerships, maybe even beyond industrial partnerships, looking into public-private partnerships, community engagements, government involvement, and so on, to go in that direction. Now, before I thank our panelists, if you remember, I asked our audience to upvote some of the questions. No surprise, the highest voted question is about, what do we do with fast fashion, right? When we think about circularity in fashion in particular, this is the first question that comes to people's minds. So what do the panelists think, about the role that fast fashion is playing and what the trends around fast fashion are going to be like? Any takers?
Well, I think, yeah.
Yes.
I think it's an obvious question, and it's a good one. And reflecting back on some of my first points around durability and timeless design, it obviously becomes a question also in that end. I think that looking at the different brands in the industry, there is high ambitions and high commitments that are put out there, which is good, because if you commit to something, someone hopefully will hold you accountable. I do think that what these companies have is creativity. And I think that couple high ambitions and commitments with creativity and a framework in terms of driving the agenda of how can we appreciate and enjoy fashion in a different way. And I'm deliberately not using the word consume, because I think consume is the wrong word if we're talking about sustainability and circularity in general. How could we enjoy or use fashion in a way where you can express yourself and you can keep yourself warm and dry, and for whatever your purpose you wear your clothes, but creatively doing that in a different way. And I see a lot of movement in that end, which I think is important. But I think that we need to acknowledge that the current, as Annie said, the current model is obviously not working. and I don't think we can shy around that fact.
Thank you, Christiane. Annie, would you
Such
like
a
to
good
go?
question. Yeah, it's such a good question. It comes up at every single panel. And thank you for the question. I mean, I think I first want to say is there's a lot of tension, right, in asking this question. And for me, there's several parts of me that exist together, and they've always existed together throughout my entire career. And in what I have chosen to do as a result of my intention to keep making changes to work with the companies. That's what I've chosen to do. I don't think, one of the things I realized through my experience is that perfection doesn't work. I've gone out there, I've told designers to do this, do that. That's the perfect way to do it. And they looked at me and they laughed and they walked away and didn't do a thing. What I always loved about working with large brands is the opportunity to scale and their resources. And I always felt like, look, I could sit here and trash talk them, or the fact that the people behind the people I have worked with at H&M, at Target, are the best quality of people, and I trust their intentions. And so I have made the decision to keep walking forward with them. That's why I have made the decision to join the OR Foundation's board. They received funding from Shein, and that was announced recently. And I made the decision to join that board to support the work that's going to be done at the Kantamanto market in Africa, in Ghana, because that intention is it's always been with me, as the opportunity for impact. So I'm going to join rather than sit on the sidelines and just keep thinking, I wish this would go away, without any ability to do a thing. So that's my decision. And I recognize there's a lot of tension in these questions. And I think that we're all allowed to have multiple feelings at the same time while still making a decision to walk forward toward the solution. And I just want to say I have much gratitude and thankfulness to the people at H&M, to the people at Target, who I work with very personally, and they are working their butts off trying to work toward the solution. For that, I'm grateful to them and for their intention and their action.
Thank you, Annie. Josefine, did you want to add something to this discussion, or?
I think they have summarized it very well, but I think in the end, what it comes down to is our previous discussion. There's no silver bullet answer, right? There's a lot of things that we need. We need circular business models. We need to rethink consumer behaviors. We need to work with regulation. We need to think about the whole transformation in terms of production and with a full definition of sustainability in mind. And I very much agree with you, Annie. We talk a lot about entrepreneurs and their important role, but I think the intrapreneurs and the change that we are now seeing in many large organizations is very important as well. So yes.
Thank you all very much. So I mean, this is a question that I face very often in my role as an educator, as a professor who teaches sustainability in a business school too. There's actually a very natural follow-up question to this. If fast fashion is perceived to be bad, is it solely the organizations that is responsible, or is that actually a role that the consumers are paying here to start with? That's number one. Number two question that you hear here is, how about developing secondary markets? If produce, consume, and trash is the bad outcome, why don't we see more of secondary market-driven initiatives? I know you all touched upon these points earlier, right? We need to educate the consumers; they need to participate in this. We need to create second-hand markets and so on. But where is that direction? Where is that discussion going in your experience so far? Number one, consumer education. Number two, marketplaces for used goods. How big is it going to be?
Maybe I can just quickly jump in there and see. I see when it comes to marketplaces for secondhand products, I see a lot of development. I think both the peer-to-peer markets are exploding, which I think is great, but I also see brands that are actually taking parts of it and facilitating in different ways. There's 1,000 different ways to do that, and I see a lot of them being explored. selfie that the H&M group is doing is one thing, where they actually also mirror secondhand products on their global e-com sites as a way of pushing and driving secondhand markets into the attention of every consumer. That's great. When it comes to consumer education, I mean, I like education, don't get me wrong. Speaking to a professor here, but I don't know if I like the word educate in this sense. It seems like as if we knew exactly how it should be, and we need to educate everyone on how to behave. I don't think it's that simple. What I do think is that inspiring storytelling and alternative ways of consuming is helpful. So I don't think it's as much about educating and coming with the pointer finger as it is about facilitating alternatives, highlighting why, but also facilitating attractive alternatives to create a movement rather than educating.
Thank you, Christiane. Thank you. Josefine, any takers? Yes, Annie, go ahead.
I'll add something. Over the last 10 years, there's been this like back and forth, this ping-ponging of whose fault is this?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, is it the consumer's fault? Is it the brand's fault? Is it capitalism? All these parts. And I don't know what the answer is personally. And what I've come to is that spending too much time figuring that out is actually counter to what we need to do. And so I've been at panels where someone steps up and just proclaims something. I try not to get caught too much in that, because I do think with a system solution, it means it's a systems problem. It's historical. It's historical. So what we want to do, or what I do at least, is try and ask myself, where are those leverage points? Where is the leverage point? Where are the biggest leverage points in the system? And how do I pull them? How do we pull them in a way that's going to be most impactful? And so one of those leverage points I found is consumer experience, or I would say user experience, is that make this easy for customers, and like they won't even give a second thought to resale. They're going to get some money back. They're going to, create a listing right away. Like, I assess my own experience and what's possible for me as a pretty aggressive noticer of my own use, and like one of the things that makes it easy for me to do the right things, whatever those things are, or however I interpret that, is make it easy for me. So there's user experience, and we should be looking at just make this easier for customers. I do think that policy is going to be hugely helpful here. And then, like what was mentioned, those people, those entrepreneurs in the company who are highly intentional, also highly emotionally intelligent, and have integrity and values behind what they're doing. And I'm going to bond with those people. I'm going to stick with them.
Thank you, Annie. Thank you. This is wonderful. As with any really good thing, we basically ran out of time. This is our last few seconds to wrap this up. I really want to thank you all, to the panelists, for this wonderful discussion and insights. And hopefully the audience has gotten as much as they were expecting from this discussion. Thank you again. Best wishes to everyone. Have a great day.